time to disassemble the Sanctum Sanctorum and build something else out of it. So, what we first need to do is disassemble this whole building. Let's grab some plastic containers and the spare parts with a couple of brick separators, and let's go. And with the help of editing magic, it's all done already. Time to build something new. So here the human helpers are getting ready to start the construction. Normally they would use two sets of instructions. One of those would be the original instruction manual that comes with the set, and the other one would be a digital copy in iPad. Of course, as this is a replicable alt build, there is no original instruction booklet. There is only the digital copy. So they'll have to do with one set of instructions. That makes placing the instructions on the table a bit more difficult because they both need to see it at the same time. But let's see how they'll manage. As usual, this build starts with a sort of a tiling phase, where first the street is tiled and then the bottom floor of the building. In addition, the first row of bricks is placed for the walls. While the building is slowly taking shape, I'd like to talk a bit about the disassembly process that you only saw a glimpse at the start of the video. Now, neither I or the human helpers had ever disassembled a modular building, so we had no idea how lengthy of a process that would be. While it took some time, it was definitely far easier to do than what I anticipated. Some time was needed for reorganizing the parts, because it's pretty hard to guess that how many different types of parts can you put in the same container when you start the process. And of course, it is far easier to combine two containers into one at the end, because you just pour the one into the other. But if one container ends up being too full, you need to resort those parts. But even with all that, it only took the human helpers few hours to get this done. Now the building that we are putting together here is an antique bookstore and townhouse alt build designed by rebelnili. You can buy the instructions from replicable.com and you can find the link in the description. Now the antique bookstore is quite a small part of this entire build. The bookstore is entirely within the first floor, and it is that grey floored section that is now furthest from you. Whereas the checkerboard section of the first floor and the entire second and third floors are part of the townhouse. And in a way, the bookstore is also part of the townhouse because there isn't enough parts to build an interior wall between the townhouse and the bookstore. Here Mr. Human Helper is placing the final details on the bookstore facade, and it is time to take a little peek how the facade is looking at this point. And I think that it's pretty interesting that the bookstore uses those brown parts in its facade, because that brown color isn't really an exterior color in the Sanctum Sanctorum. And I think that such parts usage is a great idea. It sort of creates the illusion that the alt build is not built from the same parts, because you introduce different colors to the facade. Here Mr. Human Helper adds the final parts to the bookstore facade. And you can sort of see that those parts come from the bookshelves and other wooden interior details of the Sanctum Sanctorum. Next, it was time to build that shorter exterior wall that goes next to the brown bookstore facade. Now that wall looks quite colorful and messy on the outside, and that is due to part constraints. There just isn't enough dark and light gray parts to build that wall out of those colors. So instead, that is actually a bookcase that is built into the wall and kind of forms part of the wall. And that looks perfectly okay on the inside, and if you place this next to another building, then the exterior wall doesn't matter that much either. Here, human helpers are building yet another bookcase, and those are of course the perfect interior detail for the antique bookstore. This one is not built into the wall, but it hides the sticker element of that tan panel piece. At this point, the antique bookstore was starting to be filled with detail, and now it was time to finish the walls around that part of the building. That light gray beam sort of offers some separation between the townhouse and the bookstore, but like I mentioned before, there isn't actually a wall between those two sections. A moment ago, there was pretty interesting fireplace build placed inside this building, but that was pretty hard to see from this angle. But you can better see the fireplace from this angle. The next step was finishing the bricks and the tiles for most of the walls. Only the wall closest to you is not finished at this point because there will be stairs next to that wall, and the support structure for those stairs will be partly built inside the wall. But that is a relatively quick build, so after a short while, the stairs and the remaining wall are complete. Now we only need to add a handrail for the stairs and various small interior details that mostly come from the artifacts of the Sanctum Sanctorum. And after those, the first floor is all complete. Now, one thing that I noticed during the build is that the facade section around the main door is kind of loose. It really isn't connected to the rest of the side walls, and I found this pretty odd. Next, it was time to start building the floor section of the second floor of this building. It is built in the standard modular building style of 2 layers of plate. And of course, it needs to have an opening where the stairs from the first floor come through to the second floor. Now you might have noticed that the human helpers actually switched to using 2 iPads pretty early in the build process. That just made everything so much easier. It is good that Mr. Human Helper realized that there is an older model somewhere stored away. It's a bit older and doesn't work that well, but you can still scroll through a PDF file just nicely. Now the facade of the town hall part of this building follows pretty much the design that was established in the first floor. Pretty much the only difference is that next to the windows, the second floor has brick-built nougat color sections, whereas the first floor had dark tan sections built out of tiles placed on snot bricks. The smaller section of this building, meaning the part that will go on top of the antique bookstore, uses a pretty similar color trick in the second floor than it did in the first floor, meaning that it uses a color that is not present in the facade of the Sanctum Sanctorum. This time the color is tan, and there isn't much of it in this set, but there is just enough to build that small section of wall. Once again, that small side wall looks quite colorful on the exterior, because yet again, there is another bookshelf built there into the wall to conserve some parts. The back wall is built out of light gray and nougat bricks, and it also has quite a lot of windows in it. And once again, the stairs to the next floor are built partly within that final wall. And once the final layer of plates and tiles are added on top of the walls are complete. Now, only thing that is needed to complete this floor are some interior details. Next to the stairs, there are some shelves and artifacts, a green armchair, and a grandfather clock. Now, it was getting a bit late at this point, so the human helpers decided to build rest of the details on the next day. Now, those remaining details were a desk, a couple of red armchairs, and some more shelves with artifacts. In addition to those, there is also a small kitchenette with stove and a fridge. Now, placing those details in was a bit problematic because all the walls were already built, and Mr. Human Helper does not have the tiniest of hands. Therefore, I would much prefer to see a build order where 1 or 2 walls is built first, then the interior details, and then rest of the walls. And that ensures that you have room to place those interior details. Then it was time to build the third floor. For the smaller section of the building, this is actually the roof section. But the main part of the building continues with yet another floor. This is sort of a loft bedroom with access to the roof. Now, the funny thing happens here when the human helpers build the bed for this bedroom. Usually, the creators of the outbuilt instructions create the instructions so that you can still use the original pieces from the set even if you have applied stickers on them. But the stickered pieces are not listed in the outbuilt instructions. Usually, you can still see when you're supposed to use a stickered version of that piece. But this time, when it was time to create white sheets out of white tiles for the bed, obviously using pieces without stickers, there were only 2 stickered pieces left at the end. And that means that those 2 pieces were supposed to be put in already in the build, somewhere where those stickered pieces fitted, and then 2 regular pieces were supposed to be left at this point. So Mr. Human Helper had to do a bit of searching there, and eventually he found 2 regular 1x2 white tiles in the bookshelves that could be replaced with the stickered versions, and those plain ones could be put into the bed sheets. Meanwhile, the walls of the third floor are already complete, and here Mr. Human Helper is building the roof details. Some of those roof details are part of this third floor section, but there is also a separate panel in addition to those. You can see that light gray section in the middle of the building, and I think that is a pretty good looking detail there. Next, it is time to add the final details to that lower roof section. Here, Mr. Human Helper decides to build the front section of that roof as a separate sub-assembly because he felt that it would be easier to do that way. Finally, it was time to build that last roof panel and a chimney that was part of it. And you know that you're building an alt build when you're building this roof panel out of 1x plates. I guess at this point the designer was in a whatever there is left kind of a state. Now we only need to put in the finishing details for the chimney, some railing for the edges of the roof, and some other minor details. And then the build is all complete. And now it is time for the big moment, putting the building together for the first time. And of course, it seems that Mr. Human Helper is struggling here to get that third floor in, but finally he gets the job done. Now that the build is complete, let's take a quick look of the end result. And here it is, the antique bookstore and townhouse. I have already placed some minifigures here, and I did some minor modifications to this already. And I think that this building looks quite good, and it is different enough from the Sanctum Sanctorum. There are very little signs of part constraints on the front facade or on this wall. Definitely some more on the back, and most definitely on this short wall. But more of that in the next video. In that, I'm going to go through all the minor modifications that I did for this set, and also we're going to take a detailed look of the interior. If you want to get a notification as soon as that video is up, you should consider hitting that subscribe button down there. I will upload the next video ASAP, but remember, when a Sloth says that, it means as slowly as possible. Bye bye!